Let's bring in our political editor, Beth Rigby, and also our economics editor, Ed Conway, standing by. Beth, what are your reflections?
Well, look, I think the headlines tomorrow is going to be a chancellor that a year ago raised taxes by 40 billion is now coming back for another 26 billion pounds, taking the tax burden to an all-time high of 38% of GDP by the end of Parliament. And this a government that, in the run-up to the election, said we are not going to be taxing, we will grow the economy. And she has had to eat her words there today. Living standards rising more slowly than expected. The welfare bill still going up. What is ringing in my head is when a cabinet minister said to me in recent days, this budget will be a budget for self-preservation and not for the country. And the reason that they were talking about that was that what Rachel Reeves also did there was she did what Labour MPs have been calling for. She has lifted the two-child benefit cap. It's very popular within her party. It's less popular in the country, with 60% of people polled opposed. And she's also targeted tax rises on some of the wealthiest in society. You've got that mansion tax levy. You've got the pension changes, which will hit higher earners. Overall, personal tax is going up by 15 billion, other tax changes by 11 billion. The freeze in income tax thresholds, I think the biggest one, that raises 8.3 billion, and it is effectively breaking a manifesto pledge, particularly because the Chancellor, as Kemi Badenoch noted in the Commons, explicitly said she was not going to do that a year ago because, to quote her, it would hurt working people. And the tax rate on pension contributions will raise 4.7 billion. And really, Kemi Badenoch absolutely on fire there in the Commons. Benefited, of course, because she had sight of this from this astonishing leak from the Office of Budget Responsibility. I have never seen anything like it. And it actually meant when the Chancellor stood up, no one was listening to her frame her budget because we knew what the headlines were. So she wasn't able to frame it in the way that she wanted to. Kemi Badenoch saying there it was a total humiliation. She said the Chancellor should resign. She said she has broken every single one of her promises. She said it was a budget for Benefit Street, paid for by working people. So it was pretty excoriating in the Commons there for Rachel Reeves, who must have had a really hard time standing up on her feet when her budget had been leaked. And she was a combination, I think, of utterly furious and probably just a little bit upset as well.
Yeah, it changed the atmosphere in there. Yeah. I really think it felt much more kind of raucous.
Well, she'd also lost the room before she even got in.
Exactly.
Because normally we would hang on every word because we'd been trying to work out what she was saying, and we weren't even listening that hard because we'd already got the budget. This budget, this is it. We've now got the hard copy, and that has all the tax and spend measures in it, and it was leaked.
And look, when you're putting up taxes by 26 billion pounds, then you need to be able to set the narrative. That's the least of your worries in normal times. Ed, what do the numbers say? What's the kind of projections? What's going on?
Well, I mean, we should probably start with the leak, first of all.
Yeah, let's do it.
I mean, I've never experienced anything like it. I don't think there ever has been anything like it, to have the entire contents of a budget to be... leak is probably the wrong word. It was an accidental release.
Yeah. It was
an hour or so, well, actually really kind of a couple of hours before it would have come out.
Technical mistake, I think is what they call it,
I'm kind of just looking at the markets as we speak. We said that we'd be looking at the markets just because of, you know, the fear of what happened after the mini-budget and how are people going to react to it. What we certainly didn't expect is that there was going to be this kind of a moment where traders out there would be kind of all over the place. Let me quickly show you, because, I mean, there's all sorts of charts, both about that, but also the kind of charts we'd normally be showing were it not for the leak. But as I say, start with the leak. This is just showing you, like I said, normally at this point I'm showing you the growth forecast from the OBR, but this something like this has never happened before. This is the government's cost of borrowing. It's the 10-year government bond yield, and that's where it was trading before that accidental release of the budget. And look at what happened afterwards. Look at how that just yo-yoed around. That is traders reacting to the news, trying desperately to pick up a copy of it or download a copy before it gets removed from the website, which eventually it was, and then going through it and trying to work out, is this going to be positive for the public finances? Is it going to be negative for the public finances? And we'll be updating that over the course of the coming hours, because actually, even since I made this chart, that started to trend downwards. So now this is looking like, you know, actually that's kind of encouraging. The Chancellor would like that line to be down. She certainly wouldn't like it to be going all over the place, which is what it was for a period, because people were just reacting to something that had never happened before. But let's just kind of take a step back, a breath, and just remember what this budget ultimately was about, because we now have the numbers. We've got the big numbers. This is the growth forecast last time around. Economic growth, it's really important because it feeds into everything else. 1% this year, and then 1.9, 1.8, 1.7, 1.8. So kind of stronger off in the future, weaker in the short run. Here is the latest set of forecasts from the Office for Budget Responsibility. So it's a little bit better this year, actually quite a bit better this year, 1.5% rather than 1%. But look at the following years, weaker, 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 and then 1.5 off in the final year of the forecast horizon. And take that all together, and then that feeds into a weaker growth forecast for the Chancellor. And weaker growth, by the way, that means there's less tax revenue coming in, which means that you're having to do more work to try and deal with this, the deficit. And when you're talking about the deficit, look, last time around, the higher these bars are, the more the government is borrowing. And actually, a lot of people thought the government was going to be borrowing less in the future. In fact, actually, the deficit, which is the key thing, is higher in the first year, the second year, the third year. It's only really at the end of this forecast that suddenly the deficit is looking better than it was before. And what does that tell you? It tells you that a lot of these measures we're just hearing about from the Chancellor, and we saw a bit in that OBR report, they're all quite distant. They kick in year 4 and year 5. And that's the kind of thing that, you know, a lot of people might wonder whether it's actually achievable. But here, you know, everything really in a nutshell is about the fact that the Chancellor was left with a bit of a problem. I mentioned those growth numbers a moment ago. She's got these fiscal rules, basically. She had £9.9 billion of headroom against her fiscal rules. Again, because the economy has been a little bit weaker than expected, that was eroded away, so by £5.7 billion. So all of a sudden that went, and she had to do something about it. And what did she do about it? She mostly did that. That's taxes. So that's £26.1 billion of taxes that are suddenly coming in, and then they get up to there. And I'll go to those taxes in just a second. And then because there's a little bit of extra spending, primarily on the two-child cap, that comes down by £3.9 billion. And then also the fact the economy just doesn't do as well when you're raising taxes on everyone. That means it's a little bit weaker. So she's left with more headroom than before, which is kind of why I think investors are out there probably going, well, this is better than we thought. But nonetheless, it's better because that's a lot of taxes. £26.1 billion of taxes. And final thing, I mean, I could go on forever, but I want to just break that down to show you the scale of what we're talking about here, OK? So breakdown, where are the taxes being felt, OK? So here's the breakdown. The biggest bit is those freezes to tax thresholds. Everyone ends up paying more in income tax as their earnings go up because the point at which you start paying tax is frozen. A lot of money comes in, £8 billion from that in 2029-30. But here's the surprise, and Sophie was referring to this a second ago. Salary sacrifice brings in £4.7 billion. That's basically pensions. That is most people, and it's many working people as well. Remember this phrase that the Chancellor likes to talk about. A lot of working people will be paying more in pensions because you're not getting that tax relief you were before. It kind of depends on, you know, how your scheme is operated. Property savings taxes, EV taxes, quite a lot of money. So if you drive an EV, suddenly you're going to be taxed a lot more than you were before. And interestingly, fuel duty stays frozen. EV drivers have to pay more. What's the environmental consequences of that? That's a pretty good question. We didn't get an answer. Gambling taxes. Here's one final thing. The mansion tax. So how many headlines have been devoted to the mansion tax in recent months? In the end, it only raises £400 million, which is kind of piddling compared with the rest of it. But take it all told. I'm going to stop now, Sophie, because otherwise I'll just end up kind of blathering on forever. But take it all in total, and that is a lot of money, a lot of tax that's just being raised now. And it's tax that's being raised in order to finance, A, the fact that there's a bit of a hole in the finances because the economy's not doing so well, but B, as Beth was saying earlier, there's more spending on welfare. And so it's higher welfare spending and then more taxing on the other side.